What's going on, everybody? Good evening. Hope you guys are doing well tonight. We are hunkering down for the weekend here, just a handful of hours away from the weekend. If you're like me and you're a Huskies fan, you're thinking about tomorrow, and of course, you're thinking about Sunday, but some of you guys probably already thinking about Sunday, of course. Seattle got a divisional game, a fairly important game coming up here. But before we get there, I want to talk about one of the stories tonight that's kind of come out over the last few hours. Technically, this is a rumor, but it's being reported by enough people to where I feel like it's probably true. And when I saw this, I immediately found it to be kind of interesting and also really comforting right now. So I want to talk a little bit about this. I'll call it a rumor. It's not really a story yet, but I think it's a rumor that is almost certainly true. And that's how we'll wrap up our day here on YouTube. Back in 60 seconds. All right, guys, let's take a minute so I can tell you about Sleeper, a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat on sports games in real time with other users. You can get the fastest scores, blazing fast sports news and sports alerts right at your fingertips. And of course, you can use Sleeper to play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. This is the way sports were meant to be enjoyed together. So download Sleeper today. Use promo code SBN to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. And you can pair that with another promo they have right now where you can get a $20 entry free with no deposit required. So get both of those things going. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states and growing. So check out Sleeper today, get to it, and go have some fun with sports this year. All right, welcome back. So per rumor, the Rashid Shaheed trade was not a completely two-team affair. There were other teams, and this isn't surprising because this was a coveted player that other teams would have wanted, but apparently, according to Chris Haliki, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not, though. And I've seen this from a couple other places as well. The Steelers were involved on trying to get Rashid Shaheed, and they made the same offer as Seattle did. So it would have been their fourth and their fifth. But Shaheed, I guess he had some pull here, wanted to go to Seattle. Now, the on the surface reason is, of course, he wants to play with Kubiak again after getting to play with him last year. But I cannot help but look at this and feel like it means maybe a little bit more than that. And one thing to keep in mind here is that as of right now, it looks like those Steelers picks are going to be slightly better than Seattle's picks. Right now, the Steelers have a worse record than the Seahawks. Now, granted, it's one game and things can change very easily. And even if things don't change, it's not going to be a huge change. It's not like you're losing a ton of value by sending him to Seattle instead of Pittsburgh. But it is worth noting that as of right now, New Orleans would rather have the Pittsburgh picks than the Seattle picks. They still sent him to Seattle. So that's kind of interesting on its own. Now, once again, there is a direct connection here where you have Shaheed having familiarity playing with Kubiak. And there also might be something going on with Pittsburgh that we as fans don't really get to know about because something very, very similar came out with Jacoby. I'm sorry, not Jacoby. The guy from Las Vegas, the receiver who got traded to Jacksonville. Um, this is bad. I have him on my fantasy team, and I can't even remember his name because he's barely played this year. But the guy who got traded from Vegas to Jacksonville, apparently Pittsburgh made the same offer that Jacksonville did to trade for him, and they Vegas went to Jacoby and said, "Where would you rather go?" And he said Jacksonville. So maybe this is an indictment of Pittsburgh. Maybe there's something going on there that players just don't want to be a part of. Maybe they don't want to, receivers don't want to go there because they feel like they're not going to get the ball enough. It could be a simple matter of Aaron Rodgers is probably going to retire in the offseason and they don't know who their quarterback is going to be, so they don't want to go to Pittsburgh and kind of settle there. They're worried they're going to have to be catching passes from like Anthony Richardson or somebody like that next year, and they're trying to avoid that. But when I see this, when I saw this report, I couldn't help but think about the Seattle side of it, where you have this player, a coveted player, a well-liked, well-appreciated player that a lot of people want, choosing Seattle over other destinations. And the Steelers are not a bad team, right? Now, maybe there are things going on beneath the surface there that receivers don't want to be a part of. But Pittsburgh is not a bad team. They're not a bad organization. They're going through a little bit of a lean period right now, but their lean period is not that bad. This is not the Browns. This is not the Jets. This is a team that routinely at least makes the postseason, and there is something to be said for that. So to see a player who is coveted pick Seattle over Pittsburgh, I noticed that. And it just kind of makes me think of the last several years as a Seahawks fan, where it really felt like, even as recently as last year, it kind of felt like I wasn't sure if players really wanted to be here. I think about all those free agency periods that the Seahawks had, especially after the Legion of Boom broke up. Once we got out of all the dead money that we owed some of those players, all these off seasons where the Seahawks had plenty of cap space. They had a lot of money. And a lot of people, myself included, went into free agency thinking, okay, this is the year. This is the year we get some real difference makers and push this team to the next level. Making another Super Bowl run in the latter portion of Russell Wilson's Seattle career. And off-season after off-season after off-season, they never really did it. They would sign players, but they would sign guys that didn't move the needle. They would sign guys to one-year deals that didn't really have many options around the league, right? They would sign guys like Mike Upati to fill the hole at left guard, who could barely hold his body together. Greg Olsen, that was a guy who was just looking for basically a golden parachute for his retirement. A last $7 million deal, came here, didn't really do anything. Guys like Benson Mayowa, guys like, I could go on and on, but offseason after offseason after offseason, not only did the Seahawks not land difference makers in free agency, they landed guys that even at the time of their signing or their acquisition, like, Gabe Jackson could be part of this conversation as well, even though we traded for Gabe Jackson. It just felt like you knew when you signed them that this was not going to be that great of a player. And after a while, you started to wonder why. This was a team that had a franchise quarterback. This was a team that was routinely making postseason runs, that had a winning record pretty much every year for the last extended period of time, that had been to 2 Super Bowls recently and won one. And it felt like the upper echelon players didn't really want to play for Seattle. And on top of that, and this goes back to even just last offseason, the most recent offseason, a lot of the best players that we had, like, they didn't want to be here that much either. Russell Wilson requested a trade over and over and over again. Like, Russell Wilson got his 3rd contract in Seattle after the 2018 season, I think. And the next offseason, he asked for a trade. Offseason after that, he asked for a trade. Offseason after that, he asked for a trade. And finally, the next offseason, I think, was this offseason where we actually did trade him, but he wanted out. And my understanding, by the way, is that's all been confirmed. I guess technically it's not 100% clear that happened, but it sure feels like that happened. And I think quite a few people have sounded off on it to the point where we can say that it happened. So that's your franchise quarterback, and every offseason he's asking out. He's not making a huge public deal out of it, but he's asking out. And then last offseason, your quarterback, Geno Smith, asks out. DK Metcalf asks out. And apparently DK Metcalf was asking for a trade several off seasons prior to that. Apparently DK Metcalf, basically as soon as he signed that second contract, he wanted a trade. So it got to the point where, and look, obviously those things did not work out poorly for Seattle. Russell Wilson has been terrible ever since he left Seattle. Geno Smith has been terrible ever since he left Seattle. DK's been good. DK's been good, but I don't know if there's a lot of angst about not having him at this point for Seahawks fans. So I'm not saying these things didn't work out, but as a fan, especially in the moment where you didn't know what those guys were going to do when they left, you kind of had to wonder why do players not want to be here? Like, these were our best players. These were the guys we were building the team around. And for some reason or another, they kept asking out. In the case of Russell Wilson, if you believe the stories, and I do at this point, he asked for a trade in 4 separate off seasons before he finally got it. So I look at something like this, and maybe it doesn't mean as much as I'm ascribing to it. It feels like that's starting to change, and it feels like players actually want to be part of this. Feels like we're not just rummaging around on the bottom shelf, or, well, actually, top shelf would make more sense, right? Yeah, the top shelf is where the stuff that people usually don't get is. You're not just rummaging around through the stuff that people don't want. You're not just, and obviously there's still a little bit of that because this Seahawks team is not a team that typically goes after tier 1 or even tier 2 free agents. And I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily, but there was just this period of time where whether or not it was true, whether or not it was completely fair, it felt like players didn't want to be here. And a lot of the players that did want to be here were either overwhelmingly loyal, like a guy like a Bobby Wagner. I got the sense he always wanted to be here, and there was never a sense that he was unhappy with the team. But you look at a guy like Richard Sherman, who, as soon as he left Seattle, started bad-mouthing everything about the organization for years. Earl Thomas, trying to get the Cowboys to come get him when he was still under contract with Seattle, when the Cowboys haven't won anything at that point, for 2 decades. And he's still like, hey, Dallas, come and get me. Come trade for me. Like these things just add up, and it got to the point where I, as a fan, was like, man, are we just one of those second tier or third tier organizations that exists to be kind of a feeder for the tier 1 organizations? Are we the Miami Marlins? Obviously not that bad, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. Maybe we're not the Miami Marlins, but we're not the Dodgers, we're not the Yankees. And maybe these players ultimately they just want to go where life is easy. I can even think of a much smaller example back in 2021, when Odell Beckham became a free agent. There were several teams that bid on Odell. The Seahawks offered more money to Odell Beckham than the Rams did, but he chose the Rams because he wanted to go to LA. Now, that's an LA thing. That's not something we can really do anything about. Seattle is just not the same kind of city as LA. Like, whatever. I can't. There's nothing the Seahawks can do as an organization to change the fact that they're Seattle and LA is LA. But I think you guys get where I'm coming at this from, where it just felt like the covetable players, the good players, for a long period of time, even when the team was having success, they didn't really like it here. And I don't know exactly what it was, but at the very least, you can't deny that we had quite a few high-profile players over the last 5, 6, 7 years ask for trades out of Seattle. And we're not the only team that has had that issue, but it was getting to the point where it kind of felt like there was something that players didn't like. And it feels like that's starting to change now with Shaheed. It just stands out to me. And it's just one not necessarily huge example of this, but maybe the worm is turning. And I hope that as we go through into future off seasons and future personnel decisions, we continue to get the sense that players are happy to be part of this organization and they don't feel any urgency to leave it. And Shaheed's already said some very nice things about this team and indicated he wants to be here long term. Now, obviously, what else would he say? But it's still good to hear. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I'll probably stream on Twitch later tonight, probably like Banjo-Kazooie or something. But yeah, I just wanted to meditate on this a little bit because it caught my attention. And as somebody that will occasionally, try really hard to read into a limited amount of evidence to try to come to conclusions, it's a very different feeling than the feeling that I've had in recent seasons. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think. See you soon.